30th of January, 336 days to go. Home, Flood Street, Richmond, 1:13 in the morning. Huddled in the jacket that Bogus gave me, I made my way home through the night. I moved quickly and quietly, constantly looking around for watchful eyes. By the time I got to my street and peered around the corner, I was jumpy as hell. Out of the dark, headlights suddenly blinded me as a car pulled out and headed my way. I dived sideways into the nearest garden and crouched down until it passed. It was probably completely innocent, but I couldn't help suspecting everyone and anything. I crept towards my house and relieved to see the only car there was my mum's. As I came closer, I was shocked to find a for lease sign standing in the front yard. Mum must have put the house up for rent, but where would she and Gabby live? My heart sank. I could only guess where they would go. Rafe's house. The thought of that made me sick. I crept around the backyard, and luckily the spare key was still under the cactus pot. Moving like a ghost, I let myself in. Everything was quiet and dark. I had to go through the living room to get to the kitchen, and once there I felt my way around until I found the little book beside the phone. Holding it up in the dim moonlight, I flipped through the pages until I found Great Uncle Bartholomew's address. I pulled a scrap of paper out of the bin and copied it down. Just like this. Kilkenny, Mount Helicon Road, Mount Helicon. A low growling noise came from behind me. Shocked, I spun round. Did Mum have a dog now, a guard dog? I stood immobilised, but then my eyes adjusted even more to the darkness. 1:20 a.m. There, in front of me, lying along the lounge and snoring loudly, was Uncle Rafe. He had been hidden by the back of the sofa when I came in. If he opened his eyes now, he'd be looking straight at me. I edged my way out of the kitchen, hardly daring to breathe, gliding silently past the sleeping figure without taking my eyes off him. I heard another noise behind me then, and turned to see the figure of my mother coming down the stairs. I stepped backwards silently, taking cover around the corner behind a tall bookcase. I held my breath, terrified she would hear me. She came down into the living room past Rafe and then stopped, distracted by something on the mantelpiece. She picked up a framed photograph of Gabby and me, taken at the beginning of last year before Dad went to Ireland. Mum stared at it for a long time. I noticed that in her other hand she was holding the photograph of my father that she kept beside her bed. I had to stand, silent and hidden, watching my mother's pain and grief. Both Mum and I had lost almost everything, and I couldn't even comfort her. I felt my own eyes sting with tears. After a while she turned and went back upstairs, holding the photographs close to her heart. If only I could go back upstairs too, and crawl into my own bed. Maybe I should just turn myself in and get it over with, I thought. Then my eyes fell on the portrait of my parents on the wall, the shot taken when they'd had a holiday together a few years ago. Even in the dim light it seemed that Dad's dark eyes were looking directly into mine, reminding me that I'd promised myself to look after the family, that I'd promised myself to solve the mystery of the drawings and the Ormond riddle. Standing in the dark, there and then, I made another promise to myself, that one day I'd walk back into this house no matter who was renting it, pay them off and give it back to Mum, and then everything would be the way it was. No, it would be better, way better than it had ever been. It would be as if Dad was back with us, because now I was more determined than ever to discover the huge secret he'd been in the process of uncovering. Whatever it might bring to us, it would always remind us of his presence. As I made that promise, I felt a new strength and determination in my bones. Even though the situation right now seemed hopeless, if there was a way to do this, I was going to do it. The Hideout, 38 St John's Street, 10:14 a.m. I was awake and eating more cold baked beans. I'd made myself some big promises that I needed to keep. I had my great uncle's address and I had to get ready to hit the road. All I needed was a map and a ride, but first I had to see Bogus. I was packing my backpack with some supplies for the trip when Bogus sent me a text. Feeling heaps better today, but being watched. How did you go with the address? Meet tomorrow at 2, where we used to draw with chalk. Bring them with you. Straight away I knew what Bogus meant. and what he wanted me to bring. In year 8, we used to go to a 5-storey car park and hang out writing stupid things on the walls. The road trip would have to wait one more day. I texted him back. Got the address. Cool. See you there. 31st of January. 335 days to go. The car park, Liberty Mall. 2:03 p.m. I got there before Bogus and went to the top level to keep a lookout for him. It didn't take me long to spot him jogging along, and I was about to go down and meet him when I noticed a man following him. When Bogus crossed the road, so did the man. That's when I realised Bogus was right. He was being followed, and he was leading his pursuer straight to me. I called him urgently. I watched as he pulled out his phone. "Don't turn around. You're still being followed," I told him. "Shake him off." Bogus paused while he took the call, and so did the guy behind him. I could see him pretending to look at something on the ground, and then Bogus suddenly doubled back the way he'd come, almost colliding with the man as he straightened up, and I ducked back from my lookout position. 2:19 p.m. I heard something. It was Bogus huffing and puffing. "I took him on a wild goose chase," said Bogus with a smile. "If you think I'm puffed, you should see him. We've been up and down and round and round. I sent him up and down in the lift." He plopped himself down on the ground, wiping his face. "Man, I'm glad that's over." "Who do you think it was?" I asked. "I reckon he's a cop. Out of condition, too slow and heavy. I'm going to have to be very careful whenever we meet. This isn't the first time I've been followed." "You're right, Bogus. How's Mum?" So. Your uncle's out of hospital." "I know," I said. "He scared the heck out of me last night. He was sleeping on the couch while I was breaking in." "So you know about the plan to lease the house?" I nodded. "And Gabby? How's she?" "No change. She's still in the coma." "But it's been nearly a month," I said. "She's got to come around soon." Bogus looked away a moment, and when he turned in my direction again, his face was very serious. "Cal, you should know the doctors are saying she might never wake up." "What?" I didn't want to hear what Bogus was saying. "Well, with the sort of injuries she had," Bogus continued, "and the fact she was without oxygen for so long. I thought about my desperate attempts at CPR. She might have to be on life support for the rest of her life," said Bogus. I couldn't believe it. My heart flipped. I felt so helpless. I had to change the subject. I'm heading off for the country," I said. "What did you want to tell me?" "I've had an idea about the drawings, the things that can be worn. That angel is wearing a lot of equipment and some sort of medal." I pulled out the drawing of the angel and we both looked at the medal just to the side of the gas mask. "And you told me something was stolen from your mum, some piece of jewellery. Again, something you wear," he continued. "Maybe," I said. "It was probably a gift from Mum. I'm just guessing it was jewellery. Mum said she'd never seen the box in her life." I thought of something. Maybe whatever was in the box was the Ormond Singularity. Some precious jewel or something? Something people will kill to get their hands on? "Error of logic, man," said Bogus. "They've got their hands on it already. They're still trying to." "Kill me," I finished for him. He was right. It had to be much bigger than a jewel. "Look, Cal, I don't want to sound dramatic. You know I like to keep it simple. But I just want you to know that if anything were ever to happen to you, I'd follow this thing through for you." A sudden sound near the stairwell brought the conversation to an end. A couple of security guards were hurrying towards us. "Hey, you two! What are you doing here?" "Nothing," said Bogus as we quickly rolled up the drawings. I've shoved them deep into the back pocket of my bag. "So go and do nothing somewhere else," the ugliest security guard ordered. Then he looked past Bogus at some graffiti on the wall. "You've been vandalising the walls," he demanded. "What have you just put in that backpack? Come on, give it to me." That did it. Bogus and I fled, racing down the ramp so fast I thought we'd both hurtle straight out onto the road with such force we'd be unable to stop and get run over by a bus. That didn't happen, of course. We just yelled a hasty goodbye and split up, Bogus disappearing round the corner homewards, me heading back for my last night in the derelict house, I hoped. This city was getting too hot for me. Time I got out. When I thought I'd thrown the security guards off the track, I slowed down, catching my breath. Bogus was the best friend a guy could have, but he couldn't be with me on the run. He was still part of the normal world. and I wanted to keep it that way. 10:05 that night. I knew a couple of the bouncers outside the clubs by now from my late night wanderings, and they sometimes had a joke with me. So I sat hunched over a bag of chips that the guy in the takeaway place gave me, in exchange for crushing all his cartons flat and stacking them in his rubbish bins in the back lane. He asked a few questions, but he stopped when he saw me getting uneasy about the whereabouts of my family. I decided to move on. It wasn't far off midnight now. Tomorrow would be the beginning of February. That meant I'd been on the run for almost a month. It also meant that I'd survived the first month. 10:32. With my head down, I hurried back towards the derelict house, crossing the shopping centre where only a few people were scattered, heading homewards. I saw a group of guys at the far end who seemed to be involved in an argument outside the casino, and I was crossing the road to avoid them when I realised that there were 3 men getting stuck into one guy who lay curled up helpless on the pavement. Instinctively I started yelling, "Hey, stop!" They ignored me. "Police!" I yelled out louder. And this time the 3 attackers stopped what they were doing, looked around, and then started running, leaving their victims slowly crawling away. I hurried over to him, trying to help him to his feet, but I ended up propping him up against the wall instead. As I did, he made a feeble attempt to escape, pushing me away, muttering, "Police, I've got to get away." "It's okay," I said. "There aren't any police coming. I just said that to get those guys away from you." Now the danger had passed, I took a closer look at the guy I'd helped. He was about 20, I guessed, and had a black shirt, a silver chain round his neck, and a purple teardrop tattoo just under his left eye. He pulled his legs close up to his body and was moaning. Blood dripped from his nose. "Do you want a doctor?" I asked. "I was in a medical centre not far from the backpacker hostel. Do you think you're hurt bad?" "You mean there are no cops? You were just saying that. Why?" He spoke slowly, revealing bloody teeth. For some reason I felt he was familiar, but I quickly put the thought out of my mind. "Well, just to get those guys off you," I explained. But now, in the distance, I could hear a siren wailing. Maybe someone else had called the police, and now that sound meant trouble for me. It was time to go back to my lair. Slowly, the man came up real close to my face. "You mean you just wanted to stop me getting beaten up?" "You got a problem with that?" I asked. In the silence that followed, I started to feel uneasy. The sound of the siren was coming closer. It was time to get out. The man with the teardrop tattoo offered me his grazed hand. "They think I'm working on the sly with the casino to cheat them in poker. You've saved me from getting bashed to death." Hesitantly, I shook his hand. "The name's Kelvin." I'd heard that name just a while back, and now here was another one. I grabbed a name out of the air. "Tom," I said, thinking of my dad's name. "Hope you're all right, but I've got to go." As Kelvin scrambled to his feet, I heard the sound of glass smashing behind me. Instinctively I turned. One of Kelvin's attackers had returned, and although he was already running away again, jumping into a waiting car, it was now obvious he'd thrown something through the now gaping front window of the casino. As the car took off, I was rocked by a deafening explosion, followed by the roar of flames. In seconds, the front of the building was engulfed in fire. The casino had been firebombed. What if there were people inside? I couldn't just run away and leave them. I ran towards the fire, thinking I might be able to help put it out, but I soon stopped. The flames roared impossibly high into the night sky, sending up angry sparks. I stumbled backwards a few steps, driven away by the heat. Another explosion, and the entire building was ablaze. Transfixed, I stood watching. Then I heard those sirens again. Time for me to disappear. 11:02 that night. I made a fatal error. I stopped being vigilant. I was so fixed on the fire that I'd failed to notice the car had pulled up behind me until it was too late. "Hey, what are you doing?" I yelled as the black Subaru skidded right up to me. The back door swung open and I was dragged inside. "Let me go!" "Stop struggling and keep still and shut up and you won't get hurt." This was becoming a habit and I didn't like it. I struggled as hard as I could, but my kicking legs were pinned down and my arms were wrenched behind me. "We can do this the hard way or the easy way," said my captor, a solid guy wearing a red singlet with a black Chinese symbol on it. Keep still and I'll let go of your arms. Okay, I said. Who are you? What do you want? You look real different from your picture in the papers, said Red Singlet, but we know who you are. Hey, I yelled again. What do you think you're doing? He'd grabbed my backpack and was pulling my gear out, looking through it. Was he after the drawings too? That's when I saw the driver of the car. He was the same heavily built guy who had followed Bogus. He hadn't been a cop after all. Who are you? I repeated. What do you want? The boss wants a little chat with you, Sonny. Who were these people? Did they work for the woman who had interrogated me earlier? Was she the woman who had rung me? If that woman got me again, I was in big trouble. I felt a chill spread from the base of my spine. Poor Cal. What on earth is going to happen to him? You'll have to watch tomorrow to find out.